Hey, this is Matt Markin, and welcome to episode 72 of the Adventures in Advising podcast. On today's episode, we welcome back Michael Brody Broshears from University of Southern Indiana and Kevin Thomas from University of Central Arkansas. If you don't already, give us a like and follow on social media at Advising Podcast and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Here we go with episode 72. Welcome back and happy December. We're in the last month of 2022. And after this episode, we have 3 more episodes to go as we finish the current run of this podcast. A couple quick announcements. Did you know the 2023 UCAT annual conference returns as an in-person event? It'll be on April 3rd and 4th, 2023. Check the link in the show notes for deadlines. Also, the Nakata Region conferences will be happening in 2023 as well. Registration is open. Check the show notes for more info. Now, let's get to our interview, shall we? On this episode, by popular demand, we brought back 2 amazing individuals to continue their conversation. So this is part 2 of that. Part 1 was back on episode 61 of the podcast back in June, titled The Ripple Effect of Change. And let me introduce one of them, and that is our guest host today, Kevin Thomas from University of Central Arkansas. Kevin, welcome back.
Matt, I'm so glad to be back and guest hosting a second time. 1, you said popular demand. I can't believe that that's true. And 2, that you were like, you know what? We're going to allow you to do it again. But here we are, and we're ready to have a good time. So thanks for having us back, and I'm glad to be hosting again.
Yeah, so I turned over the interview duties to you, so take it away.
All right, very good. Thanks, Matt. Our guest for the second time, and listen, Brody, I decided that I wasn't going to do the bio again because I did go back and listen to episode 61, and that was like 4.5 minutes of bio, and I thought, man, this guy's pretty great, but like he doesn't get it a second time. If you want to hear the full Brody bio, go back to episode 61, which is tremendous, and listen again. But Michael Brody Broshears is here. He is the Assistant Vice President for Academic Success at the University of Southern Indiana. He's been there for over 15 years now. Look at that, man.
15-year anniversary, November 12th.
Congratulations. That's fantastic. They're lucky to have you. Prior roles in advising, he's had at Northern Illinois and Northern Iowa. And again, for the full bio, go to episode 61. Because this is a continuation of that conversation. I think we will be just as engaged, enlightful, humorous, and at times probably a little wonky. But we will continue to do what we do and hope that you enjoy the listen today. So we're recording today, roughly 6 months later than we did the last time in June. And so how's the fall semester been? Like, what has been something that you've taken away that you've been excited about from this last fall on your campus and things that you all have been doing at USI?
Yeah, so I would say there's a lot to be excited about. On the advising front, I think it just continues to be thinking about the role that we play in retention and student success. I had a chance to kind of speak to our board of trustees in the fall, and our group's done a great job, and always being able to highlight the impact that advising's having, being able to tell your story to interested stakeholders is a real win. And so from my perspective, that was a big accomplishment in the fall for our areas to be able to do that. We are getting ready to experience some change. Change is hard. We're in the Division of Enrollment Management from 2015 to 2019, and now we're moving back into enrollment management. We're hiring a vice president for enrollment management. As you know, many institutions are facing enrollment concerns. Our institution is not unique in that, and we will be moving back out of academic affairs into enrollment management. And so kind of handling that, right? Massaging that, working with our folks, making sure they understand that the work doesn't really change and that the work is valuable and how we'll fit into this new division has been a focus of mine as well. And then I coordinate our UNIV 101 course, and I'm pretty happy about this. We have a sister city, New Harmony, Indiana, and we developed a common experience. We sent essentially 1,200 students to New Harmony for this experience as a part of our FYE program, and that went successfully. I feel really good about it, and that's kind of what's new in my world, right? The NACADA annual conference was great. It was great to see folks and be able to do some presentations, to learn some things, to reconnect with folks across the globe, and really enjoyed Portland a lot. I know you enjoyed Portland. We hung out quite a bit. It was great food. I got to spend a lot of time with my friend Carrie Kincannon, right? And went to a couple shows. And so I just had a blast there and learned a ton. So I'm pretty energized from the fall.
That's good. Did you teach this fall?
I did teach.
Yeah. And so one of my questions I had, right, because in the first podcast, you had talked about how teaching keeps you connected with with students, because in your role as an administrator, sometimes it's not as easy to stay connected. Yeah. And so I'm wondering here, with today's college student, if you will, like what were some things that you learned that you weren't necessarily prepared for this upcoming, or the teaching experience you just had?
So I teach every year, and I just full disclosure, last fall, I don't know how this happened, but my first year experience course, I think I had 18 students and had total 4 absences the entire 10 weeks, right, during COVID. I had a group that completed every assignment. Like, I don't think I sent a reminder out for anybody turning in late work. It was just an amazing group. And I have an amazing group this fall too, right? No doubt. But a greater diversity of student in this semester, right? Even this idea that I've got a couple of students who've said, I'm not really sure college is for me. Plenty of students that are not turning in work, plenty of students that are not doing just the minimal things needed to be successful in a first year experience course. And we use our first year experience course as a real retention tool on our campus. And when you go to the National FYE conferences, they talk a lot about UNIV 101 or first year experience serving as kind of this early warning for how students are performing in other work. And so it's concerning to me, right? I've heard this message in a lot of our other advisors sections. They're speaking to some of the same challenges. And I do think at some point in time, what I'm learning is COVID has had a real impact on students' ability to kind of handle this stress, to handle being on campus. It has been a challenge. And for many of our first year students, it's a real learning curve in terms of getting up to speed and understanding what it's going to take to be successful in college. And so we've spent a lot of time talking about how to help students through that. I don't think we have any magic potion or silver bullet. It's going to continue to be hard work.
Yeah. No, those are good insight. I just, from teaching the courses I've taught in the past, that flow of each course or each class of students brings something different, a challenge, a learning opportunity. And I think it's always interesting to see how that flow is going, especially when we talk about our role in administration and being more removed from the student experience on the front line than most of the folks that we work with on a daily basis are.
That's exactly right. I agree with you totally, Kevin. No doubt.
Very good. So you mentioned the annual conference in Portland. It was fantastic. Learned a lot and went to some really great sessions. I know that you presented several times, especially on advising administration, and really at the level of position that you're at in the work that you do. And since the last time we've talked, I will put this plug in. You are a faculty member now for the Advising Administrators Institute. So this February in Orlando, you'll be joining that faculty, and I know we're glad to have you. That's something that I have the honor to serve on as well. And so congrats on that new opportunity for you. When you were doing the presentations, at times there's questions that come from the audience or people that come and talk to you afterwards. And so I'm wondering if there's like a theme that you saw or a primary focus or concern of our colleagues throughout the globe and the things that they may have mentioned when we're talking about advising administration and the things that we're facing on our campuses?
Well, I definitely think that advisors are feeling the stress of issues like enrollment challenges. They're feeling the stress. We talked a lot about this maybe in the first piece, right? This idea of be careful what you wish for, you just might get it, right? Advising is being seen now as a high impact initiative to improve retention and student success. And people have begun to believe that. And so we're not the only people, though, responsible for that. And so a lot of my questions, I think, dealt with that. And then you add in, we're asking administrators to do the same things. So I just had this conversation with a colleague the other day. The work just keeps piling on, and people want to be good at the work that they're going to do. They want to do a good job, but you get pulled in so many directions, it becomes harder to stay focused on the things that are most important. And so as an administrator, one of the things that I think about a lot is keeping advisors and my direct reports engaged and asking the right questions and making sure that you're spending the time necessary to get folks and can keep folks focused on the tasks that are the most important, right? And trying to help advisors deal with the frustrations that come along with added workload, increased stress, more challenging student situations. And so a lot of the questions that I saw at these conferences, how do I help my advisors be engaged? How do I keep advisors from being burned out? How do I really focus in on the work without, just wanting to pull my hair out? I have had no success keeping hair where it's supposed to be, but I understand those frustrations, right? And so I think about meaning making a lot. I think about happiness a lot, and we're not wired to be happy all the time, but there are things that I think as administrators we can do to help folks feel like they're still making a difference and to help folks still feel like the work is really important. And I think that that's a theme that's really important across the globe now and in our association and in our profession is keeping advisors motivated to do the work, right? That's essential to student success.
For sure. You mentioned that it's constant, right? The work that we do is constant. And I was talking with our good colleague, Jessica Staten from IU the other day. And I told her I'm like just going to use this phrase nonstop, right? So after Thanksgiving timeframe and through the end of the fall semester, I'm now referring to as the December Blitz, right? Yeah. And the December Blitz is all of the things that are going on, making students getting registered, seeing them, finals week, commencements, parties, cookies, retirements, all the things that come up, right? That it's just nonstop. But our world is so much that all the time. Even though in this time frame that we're in the fall, it feels even a little bit more condensed. So I guess my question is like, how are you balancing that personal and professional aspect of what you do? And how do you encourage that, especially as an administrator and the professionals around you, just to find those balances in what they're doing, especially in times like right now. But in the advising profession and student success, it feels like always.
I think with the folks that I work with, I've really tried to embrace this notion of flexibility. People are professionals, and I like to treat people like they're professionals. I think that's really important. And so I've whenever possible have encouraged vacation time. Whenever possible, if a person contacts me and says, "Hey, Brody, I think I really need to work from home today." We do have some policies in place on our campus, but I adhere to those policies most certainly. But when we can provide flexibility, I think that does help us, right? When folks feel like they're trusted to do the work and that we know that they've done extra work, right? That flexibility feels like the least we can do. In terms of just overall balance, I continue to encourage learning whenever possible. I know I send a lot of articles to my group, and some of them really have to do with personal balance, or I'll send podcasts that, like I was talking to you yesterday about fresh air, that fresh air segment on retirement. Those are really interesting things that can get people to kind of think about their lot in this world differently. And I think whenever you can read an article that kind of makes you think a little bit, or whether you can listen to a podcast that makes you maybe re-examine how you view your role in this world, it's really important. I try not to. So personally, I try not to take work home with me. That is not always possible, obviously, in my role. But for the most part, I'm still exercising pretty regularly. I haven't eaten as well as I need to in the last year. So I'm a runner, right? So 10 pounds makes a difference. And I'm a big guy, so 10 pounds doesn't seem like a lot. But for me, I know the difference when I'm out running. So I can be better at certain things. And then, I'm spending time with my family. I'm still into records. We talked a little bit about kind of my obsession with vinyl here all of a sudden when COVID hit. That has become something that I spend a lot of time reading about, watching YouTube videos, just the fun stuff. And then I read a ton, not books per se, but anything related to higher education, I'm reading it. And I encourage that. And I feel like that from a balance perspective, that's really useful because it helps me. It gives me ideas, ways to be more efficient, ways to be better at my job as a supervisor and as an administrator. And then I talk to colleagues across the country kind of to get their feel for how they're managing these kinds of challenges as well. You and I we talk at least once a week, I think, for the most part. And I learn a lot from those conversations, and they help me a ton. And I think having people in your world that you can connect with that know the kinds of things you're going through are really important. My role is kind of unique on my campus. I don't have a ton of people in my space, right? And that I automatically can go to talk about these problems. And when you get into positions like that, that can be hard. It can be challenging. And so I think having those networks is also another thing that's really important.
When we were in Portland, one of the conversations I felt like just kept coming up was disparity in pay, right? Not necessarily by administrators, but like you have advising positions that are low 30s to mid to high 50s, sometimes 60s, depending on area of the country. And the positions themselves are similar. The pay is more regional to where it seems to be. But we often talk about the benefits that come with the pay that's there. And I think if there's another part of what you're talking about is that in our jobs, we're often earning vacation and sick time.
Yeah.
Utilize those things.
Yes, right? Absolutely.
The folks that every once in a while you interact with that have a badge of honor that's like, oh, I lost days last year because I didn't take them.
That's terrible. I don't like hearing that at all.
Don't do that, right? Like again, this is part of your benefits package of being an employee. This is part of your time to get away and get out and making sure that you're in an environment where you can do those things. And that's an environment that you want to be in if you're able to take those days and utilize that time. And if you've got the flu, be out with the flu. If you're not feeling well, be out. If you want to go on a vacation, schedule a vacation. Like it's the time to do those things for that balance too.
Yeah, I don't know that I would wear this as a badge of honor, but I don't think there's been a time in my 15 years here where I've said no to a vacation request, or I've said no to a person who said I need to be out today because of this or this. And I think there are some people who say, Brody, you do need to say no sometimes related to those kinds of requests. And look, I think most of our advisors know that you shouldn't be requesting vacation during orientation timeframes. I mean, I don't get those kinds of requests, but there's never really a time where I haven't felt like if a person requests vacation, they don't not deserve that time. And right. I think as an administrator too, it is important to model this idea that our jobs are important and they're extremely valuable, but they don't trump our personal well-being, right? They're not, we are changing lives. And in some instances, we're saving lives, but not in the medical doctor sense, not in a super crisis moment. in most instances, right? And so I think it is important, like you talked about there, and it was something that I kind of missed when you asked that question, is to encourage the use of vacation time, mental health days, sick days, when appropriate. And for me, that's almost always, right?
In our conversation in the summer, you mentioned that one of the most important parts of your job is to make sure that advisors have the tools to be successful, that you're helping to aid in their relationship growth, eliminate roadblocks. I think all of that is true in the role that you have with the people that work for you. I guess I'm curious how in your role you supervise up, you coach up, you teach up to those that you work for, or those that are in higher levels organizationally than you may be. And you mentioned that being an administrator is harder than ever in our conversation in the summer, and I agree. And so I think that no matter what role you're in, no matter who's listening today, that ability to coach up, teach up, mentor up, educate in that way is a pretty powerful one. So how do you do that effectively in your role?
Well, I want to first preface by saying I've been really fortunate in my career, in most instances, if not all instances in my professional life. My supervisor or supervisors have been people who I think get it. They understand the work that we're doing. So that's made it a little bit easier. But I think it really comes down to constant communication. It comes down to sharing what you believe are the differentiators in the work that advisors are doing and how that work is making a difference. Data, I think telling that story is tremendously important. So I think putting people that you trust in front of those folks too, right? I've had a couple of directors over the years present at the board of trustees. So you talk about internal stakeholders and external stakeholders as well. So I think sharing that message with people like the board, who really kind of serve as the driving force for our strategic goals and strategic plan. And then you talk about the people that you're going to work for. So, I meet pretty regularly with my supervisor. I tend to believe that honesty is the best way to kind of approach our communication piece, right? So if we're feeling a crunch, I'm able to articulate that. I feel like I've got a good enough relationship where that's important. If there are reasons why we aren't being successful, I'm able to kind of articulate that. And then I have data and information that's going to help tell that story, right, in real meaningful ways. And it is, it is about letting folks know that what advising really is and what it isn't. It is about letting folks know how we're doing the work in the trenches. I'm constantly letting my supervisor know, hey, this is how we're dealing with the not registered list. This is how we're dealing with it by unit. This is how we're dealing with it as a collective. These are the activities and initiatives that we've put into place to make this as effective as possible. I share that information for the most part every week, every other week to our deans, to our executive director of enrollment. And so I think that communication piece is really important, and helping people understand the work that advisors are doing is critical. We do the surveys, and surveys are just one tiny form of the assessment piece, but we share those results with our folks on a pretty regular basis. I try to articulate and meet with each of the deans from time to time, usually at least once a semester, to kind of highlight the work that the advising centers are doing. What's working well in your college, what isn't working well, how can we be more helpful to the overall success of students in the college of, you name it, right? And so I think that those kinds of relationships are really important, and they help they help in a couple of ways. One is they help you kind of understand, hey, I have a real important role in all of this, but then they help the community as well, because they need to understand the important work that advisors are doing, and the importance of advising on all of those our strategic plan has those metrics, and we got to meet those metrics. And if you're not meeting those metrics, how did advising help us get close to those metrics? How could they help us get better in those metrics? And so I think all of that is really, from my perspective, an important part of my role, right? And so that supervising up is about constant communication and telling a really good story.
Yeah, I would agree with you on all those fronts. And then I also think sometimes it's about the audience too, right? Like the way I communicate with my supervisor as far as information provided is different than the president.
Yes.
Right? Like president, I'm going to give a page to, if anything, on a handout, and provost sometimes wants more than that.
Yeah.
Right. Like and deans, if you're given general information, they generally want to know how their college is doing, and maybe sometimes how their college is doing against the other colleges.
Yeah.
And, so I think the audience plays a factor in that too.
Yeah. You get 10 minutes with the board, you get an hour with the provost, right? You get 20 minutes with the program directors and department chairs. And if you go to a dean's council meeting, you might get 30 minutes, right? It is, even just the time you have kind of impacts the message that you're going to send. There's no question about it. Or the questions you're going to ask, or the questions you're going to take.
So you mentioned that you various people that you look at, right? Like that you look towards and you have conversations with, and, you and I talk once a week, that type of thing. And just, talk about whatever's going on in life. Sometimes it's Cardinals, sometimes it's random things, sometimes it's higher education, a lot of times it's job, a lot of times it is. So when you think about these conversations and the things you're doing with folks and all that's going on, like what excites you about the profession? Like you mentioned retirement in an early answer, and that's one of those that's interesting depending on where you're at, right? Like in life, is what's coming ahead of us. But like, what excites you about the profession until you hit that retirement time frame? And then I guess the second part of this is, who do you look to and see? Like, what are the people or the institutions that you look at and you go, okay, if this institution is doing it, I know it's the right way. Like, who are your go-tos in those areas to just say, yeah, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look at folks that are doing these things really well. Like what were those folks, and who are those folks and institutions that you would go to?
So I break that up into kind of metrics, right? Like I got my chops working with undecided students. So when I think about our work with undecided students here on this campus, for example, my good friend Dave Marchesani at the University of Northern Iowa is somebody that I really trust and respect a lot. Kathleen Shea Smith, Carrie Kincannon, David Spite, right? Whatever they're talking about, they've been really involved in that exploratory advising area. And those are spaces and or places, right? So whatever's happening in Oklahoma, I kind of pay attention to. In the state here, I'm a graduate, and I got my undergraduate degree from Indiana University. My good friend and colleague Dan Turner now is overseeing their university division area. That's a space where I look at what they're doing with their exploratory students a lot. So when I think about that piece, those are kind of my Oregon State, right? Carrie up there, David Spite in his spot. I know that he's in the California system, right? All of those places are places that I look to. When I was in Region 5, Kent State was doing a lot of great stuff with our exploratory students, and they've got a really good kind of connection. And then I've really tried to connect on the career advising side, and a good friend of mine who was the director of the Career Exploration Center up at Wisconsin-Madison, Jonathan Ferguson, he worked for me at Northern Illinois University. They have a really good program there, right? So those are some of my places when I think about undecided and exploratory. From an administrator perspective, I think about a lot of times either past supervisors or current supervisors that I think just have their stuff together. One of my first supervisor here at the University of Southern Indiana, Dr. Brian Posler, he's now the president at Lake Erie College, and he's a person I'll talk to related to supervision and engagement. He's just a person that I really trust and respect. Gene Neibauer, who was my former associate director at Northern Iowa, is somebody I haven't talked to in a while, but right before she retired in the early 2010s was the first time we kind of moved into enrollment management. And she was a great person to talk to about that transition, because we had gone through some similar transition at Northern Iowa when I was there. And, so you find those folks, right? You find those people. I mean, obviously you and, lots of the people that we've presented with, Karen, Archambault, former president of NACADA, Aaron Justina, former president of NACADA, Cecilia Oliveras. I mean, it's a good group to be connected to. I feel fortunate that you have those voices, folks that are experts in their respective areas that can be of real help to you. Tara Warden at the University of Cincinnati, right? Like, these are all people that are doing great work on the administrative side. And I seek them out whenever I need something. That's not always. And then on campus, I have great people. One of my former supervisors, who's a colleague now, the associate provost, Dr. Shelley Blunt, she's a great friend. Our dean of students is somebody that I've really connected with. She just joined us a couple of years ago, Dr. Jennifer Hammett. She's kind of a national expert in student life and Title IX work. And so these are just folks that I think finding your people is important, right? That's one message that I would make is, if you don't have that on your campus, you've got to find those people in other places. And I've just been really lucky to have great people to kind of help me through some of these turbulent and challenging times in higher ed.
When you're reaching out, or when you're looking at institutions, let me ask it this way. When you're looking at institutions, is it through the people, or like, are you visiting websites and social media, and like, how's that going, or how are you doing that?
I think it's all of those things, right? Like, I think, I'll give you an example. IUPUI did a great session at last year's regional conference about how they're using Instagram. And you think, God, that's kind of small scale, but it really was a pretty amazing look at how academic advisors are engaging with students in spaces where students are. So that was a session that, as an administrator, you think, should I go to this? Should I not go to this? But I took a ton from that session, and they did an awesome job of kind of creating an Instagram page to do the presentation, which was, I thought, really, really innovative and interesting. Sometimes it's about a concept. We had a colleague of mine here at USI, one of our directors, won the Best of Region in Region 5 last year, presenting on how to take a framework from a Gretchen Rubin book, who's written the Happiness Project, and how to integrate that in terms of our work with students. So, sometimes it's a concept, sometimes it's a website, sometimes it's a person. If I have a specific problem, maybe that, I think is consistent with, say, a regional 4-year institution, it might be a specific person at an institution where I'm familiar with that person. But in other instances, it might just be, hey, I've got a problem, and who do I think is the best person to solve that problem? So I try to be strategic when that's the case, but I'm also open to kind of learning and seeing how things work. And so sometimes that means going into spaces that you don't normally visit.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And I guess for listeners today, I would just encourage to use the avenues that are there, right? Like, whatever's there for the interactions that you're having. You see people at conferences, don't be afraid to contact them afterwards. Don't be afraid to go up and talk to them and ask questions that are on your mind. Follow them on social media, whatever it may be. A couple weeks back, you mentioned Karen Archambault. Like, she and I did a presentation for a class class for Dr. Pete Sasso down at Stephen F. Austin University.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
we were doing that presentation, and afterwards, I said, we're people that you can contact afterwards and ask these questions too. And had one student reach out, and we've been back and forth on a couple of things that we've been talking about. It's just, when the opportunity's there, connect in that way. I think those can be really powerful things, because the relationships you build can be so critical to some periods of time that you go through as a professional and as an administrator. Yeah,
absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And I like those opportunities too, right? I forgot to mention that I'm doing the Emerging Leaders program for the first time This year, I'm starting my first 2-year tenure as a mentor, and that's been really exciting, getting to know another person, right, who's doing this work, and I'm learning from her as much as she's learning from me. It's been really a lot of fun. We've talked about a concept called job crafting, and we're talking about how do we maybe present on this or write about this. And so I think about all of those, like that's not something when I thought about doing the mentoring program that I thought would come out of this, but that's amazing. She's like, hey, do you want to think about doing something like this? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. Right. So sometimes it's just, I say this a lot. I should say no more, but sometimes yes is the right answer, right? Yes is the right answer a lot of times. Experiences can mold us in really interesting ways, and you never know when you give something a chance, whether that's something that you're doing on a personal level versus something that you're doing at a professional level. Sometimes saying yes, like I know sometimes people say, hey, I don't think I'm ready for this. Yeah, I bet you are. And if you say yes, you're going to figure that out really fast. And there has to be support there, right? Like if you're a supervisor, you're working with somebody and you're encouraging maybe an extra step or kind of moving out of a comfort zone. There's got to be support there, but sometimes yes is the right answer.
So I want to ask about it being an administrator and your role, and use the framing of doing versus dreaming. And you can take that and say the work versus the vision, whatever you want to use it as. But like in your role, when, as you mentioned, there's so much work going on. There's so many things that are on your plate every day. How do you balance the doing versus dreaming in your role, and how do you manage that on a daily basis?
Yeah, man, that is hard. One of my least favorite things to do is signing my name to forms, right? And I do a lot of that in my work. It is a balance. We've been pretty lucky the last 10 years or so with the strategic planning processes. We've been through 3 strategic planning iterations. And I would tell you that in the first one in 2010, that's where the creation of the advising centers came from. And so that's a big dream. It's high impact, high work, right? Like it's a big project. It's going to take a lot of people to do the work. And so you do that as part of the first strategic plan. And then the second strategic plan comes and you're not quite done with that project. And so you're still doing it, but you're also thinking, what can this look like? And then in the third strategic plan, we're connecting kind of the creation of those centers to, say, for example, retention rates and student success rates. So you have to continue to kind of think about how does advising best serve students in this place? And you can't just do that by doing the work, right? So I would tell you that I've been in constant conversation about models and structures with folks. And even on this campus, I'm in a group right now. And I think this group's probably going to continue to make really dreamlike recommendations, which are maybe we should professionalize advising through the 4 years throughout the process. Right now, our advising centers primarily serve students in the first couple of years. We pitched this at the first iteration of the creation of the centers, and there was a lot of resistance to that. And faculty are incredibly important to the success of our students on our campus as well. But what if that role looked different? So we're starting to ask those questions. So even when you're doing, I think how do we do better is really the dreaming component of that, right? And so I say this a lot, even in individual advisors, right? I've never met an advisor that has told me, hey, I'm not very good at my job. Most advisors think they're pretty good at it.
Right.
But we can all get better at it, right? And so that's where the dreaming comes into place, the training and the development. And maybe that's even just better doing rather than dreaming. But I think when you're doing, you are also visioning ways in which things could look different or be more effective, or more impactful to the institution, to the individual units, to the actual individual advisor as well.
Right. Absolutely. I agree.
I hope that was a good enough answer.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't try to skirt it. I mean,
no.
visioning is hard, right? Because there's so many moving parts. And I would say, right, if you've read anything at all, I mean, look, we don't move at the speed of light in higher ed, right? So change lots of times takes time. It's a hard push, right? It takes a lot of effort, and there are lots of partners. It's a little bit different than industry in some ways. It's a little bit different than some of our other institutions in many ways. And so you can be doing and visioning at the same time, and that visioning just takes forever to get there, but you just can't stop, right? Like you got to keep thinking about it in ways that really focus in on the what is possible. Yeah. What's the potential? How could it be better?
No, I vision so many things in the percentage of our time that we have to give, right? And that's the thing is, like, on any given day, that balance of doing and dreaming might be 90-10, 80-20, right? Like it fluctuates. And I think as administrators, when it becomes too heavy on particular areas, like, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I've been doing 98% of the time and dreaming 2% of the time, that you get hit with like a ton of bricks. It's like, oh, I kind of forgot about where we're moving forward, what we're doing. And so that balance is hard because you don't want to lose that. But that, I just think the various flows of the year are often part of that conversation.
Yeah. So the other thing that kind of comes along with this, I fear that sometimes this honesty is not good for my own well-being, but some days I just think, God, I'm not as good at certain things as I used to be because of the work, right? Well, isn't that interesting to say out loud? But because the work's coming at you in so many different ways, or because maybe you've proven successful in a new task, all of a sudden that new task becomes a task that fits into your job description in ways that you didn't automatically anticipate. And that impacts all of the other tasks that need to happen. So I sometimes think as an administrator, I'm better at a lot of the things that I've done, but in other ways, maybe I'm not quite as good as what I used to be in other realms. And that's difficult to stomach, right? There has to be a reluctance to accept, but I think there has to be an honesty with yourself, even as an administrator, that when things change, it's difficult to be on top of everything all of the time, right? So certain things may become less the do, right, and more trust the people that are doing it, and other things may become, I got to be more involved in this specific piece, and that's hard. It's a hard piece to deal with as an administrator. But I think it's something that, as I talk to other administrators across the country, we're all kind of trying to tackle.
I agree. No, I agree completely. All right, man. We're to your favorite part.
Oh,
it's lightning round.
All right.
I'd like to reflect upon the last lightning round that we did. This time, I'm for sure not asking you how long it takes you to get ready in the morning. That one seemed to trip you up, so we're not going there. I'm also not asking why we can't tickle ourselves. You thought that one was weird.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that you were 100% correct in the Cardinals finishing first, and then 100% wrong, and then winning the World Series. So you did miss out on those from the last lightning round. Not bad, right? We'll go ahead and get started here with some fun ones. Best television show of all time.
Good God. Seinfeld?
That's an answer. The West Wing was also an acceptable answer. The best podcast you listened to in 2022.
If I don't say Adventures in Advising, I feel like I'm going to be in deep trouble. Look, I listen to The Daily a lot. I listen to Song Exploder a lot. Both of those, I listen to Fresh Air a lot. Those are all podcasts that I love, and things that I pay attention to a lot. The Inside Higher Ed podcast has been pretty helpful, I think, overall. Right? If you got a chance to listen to that podcast, they've talked a lot about return on investment, a lot about the value of a college education, and just generally, I have found those conversations to be really useful in the work. But those are 3 or 4 that I've really dug a lot.
Check them out, folks. Check them out. You mentioned earlier you become a vinyl guy. Your favorite purchase in 2022 on the vinyl side of things?
Yeah, I love the Plains record. I saw them in Portland with my good friend Carrie Kincannon, their second show ever. These 2 kind of indie rock folks made kind of an indie country record, and it's great. And then the Micaiah McCraven record is a new jazz record that I'm super stoked about. Those are probably my 2 favorite of the year.
Talking or texting?
Texting. But talking is a close second. I mean, I like both.
Fair enough. Best concert of 2022 that you went to?
I just saw Guster a couple weeks ago. I mean, they're my favorite American band. They're awesome. But that Plains show was unbelievable. So I think that's my favorite show.
That's good, because I was going to revisit later on your sign-off was Gusters for Lovers. The nickname, listen, this is a hard one, right? Because you are Michael Brody. But did you have a nickname that your parents or friends used to call you as you were growing up that you're okay with saying in public?
Yeah. My dad used to call me Stretch because I grew really fast, kind of in the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, right? Like I was a little round guy, and then I became a big, tall string bean. The human garbage disposal was another nickname that my family had for me. Those are 2 that are they're safe enough, I think.
All right. Would you rather be able to speak in every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
That is easy. I am an animal lover, and I would much rather be able to talk to animals.
It would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Cake or pie?
Both.
Yes. Favorite number?
I like 13. Everybody hates on 13. My number, my basketball number was 53, and I always kind of liked that number too for whatever reason. But 13 is kind of the number I like the most.
If you could push a button and make everyone in the world 7% happier, but it would also put a worldwide ban on hairstyle products, would you push it?
Absolutely.
Right. Me too.
Most hairstyle products are bad anyway. They're not good for you.
Yeah. Are reindeer real creatures?
Yes.
Do you like the word dapper?
Absolutely.
Is Jimmy Kimmel funny?
I think so. But I enjoyed him a lot more when he was talking about those issues related to his son. I don't know. I mean, I would cry every time he did those things. I'm not, and Jimmy Kimmel has kind of a sordid past too. But he's evolved, I think. But I do think he's funny. Yeah. Sorry.
Top 3 traits that make up a good administrator.
Boy, that's a hard one. We went from fun to super hard.
You're welcome.
I think you got to be available and accessible. You need to work hard, right? And you do need to have some visioning, right? You have to be able to kind of see the bigger picture.
All right. Who inspires you?
My mom's had a rough go the last couple of years, and she's really doing an amazing job, right? Your parents are both my parents are really amazing. My dad's been through a lot here the last couple of years. They inspire me. My wife and kids inspire me, right? Like, you know, they're all 3 just much better than I am, right? Like, they're just really, really special folks, all of them. I don't know how they put up with me.
Well, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. Way to go, Mom. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our time. And I don't have any other lightning round questions, but I wanted to end on this note. This is likely because, as folks are aware from previous versions, one of the last episodes of the Adventures in Advising podcast. So as you reflect upon the time of listening or being on the show, any just thoughts on the profession and advising and what this podcast has really done in that period of time, or that you've been able to gain from it, that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yeah. Nakata, right? I think just as an association, the people is what I really would want to reflect on, right? Just the value of the relationships that I've been able to develop through this association, through the knowledge that I've been able to gain through this podcast, right? Like, it's so inspiring. And so it just kind of warms my heart, right? To know that there are people across this country that are just as passionate about advising as you and I are. And that, sometimes we get to see them in person, and other times we have to interact through social media. But I think it's a special, special profession. And I think about the countless thousands, hundreds of thousands of students that have been impacted by academic advisors. It's really pretty amazing, just overall. I mean, that sounds kind of corny, but it's just true, right? I'm not the professional I am without NACADA. I'm not the person I am without NACADA, right? And at the end of the day, I'm pretty thankful for that, right? And pretty thankful for people like Matt Markin, who, this is it's a pretty innovative way, to kind of use technology. And we've got lots of people who've been involved in the technology piece, right? So Sarah Howard and John Souter and the Cunninghams. NACADA was doing some work, and Lee and Gary just retired, right? And they've been kind of involved in that. So, but I'm thankful for Matt, right? And for this podcast, because it's just a different way to kind of get this out and about. And so I think anytime we can kind of think about innovative ways to share the work and the impact of the work, it's really awesome. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I would echo the countless hours that I've spent listening to said podcast. And, most of the time it's on a treadmill or walking outside or doing something, and the amount of good that's come from those ideas that are out there. Like, somebody will come on and be like, I don't know what I'm really going to gain from this particular guest this week, because the roles are so different. And sure enough, I'll be listening, and all of a sudden an idea comes up, and I'm like, type it into my notes real quick here, and so I don't forget that idea. And it's those type of things that really came up over the years that this has been on, and we've been able to listen. And I know that he's going to continue on, but I appreciate the opportunity to learn in that way, because like you said, it's just a different way to engage, a different way to be a part of the community that we both enjoy so very much, and that we both think of so highly. And so it's been a great time to do that. Okay, as we finish, what is the best way for folks to get a hold of you, Brody, if they'd like to do so?
Email's easy, mbroshears@usi.edu. That's the easiest way. I am on Facebook. So that's another good way. I'm on Instagram. That's another good way. My Facebook is Michael Broshears, not Brody Broshears. So don't get tripped up there. But my Instagram is Brody Broshears. So that's kind of different. But all you're going to get
confusing for everybody.
Yeah. All you're going to get there are just food pictures and record pictures.
Listen, your food pictures are tremendous. It makes me think that I need to be wherever you're at that particular moment. So thanks for that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for being a guest with us today, Brody. And until next time.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming back on as a guest host, Kevin and Brody. Always enjoy listening to your advice and your experience. And that does it for episode 72. Check back for our last December episode of 2022 with episode 73. Take care and keep advising.